And we have a very distinguished panel, as you'll find out. Ask them questions. If you have a question, please come up to the microphone so that we can get this recorded. While the slide decks, you'll have to see the individual speakers for. All the videos will be uploaded eventually to the HUSETCon site, and you'll be able to download the full videos of all the presentations. With that, Ann?
Thank you. Thanks, Jack. Thank you so much, Jack. Appreciate it. Hey, everybody. My name is Ann Merrick, and I live here in Houston. I'm a native, and right now I'm an account executive with Abnormal Security, but super excited to be moderating the panel today. Very honored to have the privilege to do this. It is my first time moderating, so no heckling. I know there's some of you out there that have threatened. I mean, okay, fine if you want to a little bit, but I'll just ignore you. But anyways, I want these ladies to introduce themselves. We have an awesome group here. So Shannon, do you want to go first?
Thank you, Ann. Shannon Stafford. I am the Director of Security Operations and Engineering for Entergy. I'm actually based out of New Orleans. I've been with the company for almost 17 years. And for SecOps and engineering, I've got threat and vulnerability management, red teaming, pen testing, the engineering team, the cyber and physical operations centers, data loss prevention, and that covers IT, OT.
Good morning. My name is Erica Connor. I am the Director for Cybersecurity and Compliance for ChampionX. I have been there for about 6.5 years, and my responsibilities include everything pretty much that she said, along with the compliance side, and very happy to be here, so thank you for joining us.
And good morning, Anessa McKenzie. I'm the CISO at ConocoPhillips here in Houston, and I've been with ConocoPhillips about 2.5 years. I look after not just IT, OT, cybersecurity, but I also have enterprise architecture, and I look after a stack of our corporate apps. So I am very, very, very impressed that we have all women up on this stage, so y'all just need to give us a round of applause.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, we've been pretty psyched about this panel for a while now. So I wanted to ask a fun fact because I want to keep this a little fun before we get into the questions. So why don't we go through each one of you? If there's something fun and exciting that the group and people that know you wouldn't necessarily know, what do you want to share?
So I have a little funny story to tell, because when you asked that in preparation, I was thinking, my mind went completely blank. I had no fun facts. Let me check ChatGPT and see what it says I should share with all of you about a fun fact. And it said nostalgia is a good thing to revert to. So my fun fact is that as a kid, I loved climbing trees. It wasn't just about climbing trees. I had to compete with myself. I would bring a little roll of tape on my, put it on my arm, and as I would climb, I would try to compete and reach higher and higher levels in those trees. So if you didn't like that, blame ChatGPT.
Mine wasn't as hard, but probably a handful of people here know that I go to the Renaissance Festival, and I've been going for about 22 years, since before my kids were born, and I do dress up, so you can ask me later what I dress up as.
Uh-oh. My fun fact, I'll say that, I was talking with some of our younger folks that are on the cyber team yesterday, and we were talking about dances and formals, and so I have an 11th grader, a junior in high school that is doing homecoming, and my fun fact is I never went to any dance in high school. So if you're the mom that has to prepare the 11th grader for homecoming, what's a mum? Okay, I got introduced to what a mom is. I got introduced to how to propose to your homecoming date. I became really good at it this year. I guess I succeeded. Everything went well last weekend, but fun fact is maybe I should have tried to go to a dance. I might have been a little more prepared as mom.
All right, so I guess I'm not on the panel technically. Fun fact about me, though, really quickly, some of you may or may not know this. I was a cheerleader in college. The part you may not know is and at one point during a stunt, I fell face first on the gym floor, cracked my 2 front teeth, had to go get those fixed, and then fast forward, I get into cybersecurity, and then I get veneers, and they look amazing. So the teeth have definitely been a journey. Okay, so let's get into the topic. So everybody here, I guess, raise your hand if AI is something that you see all the vendors talking about. It's obviously a hot topic, right? Everybody, I think, is saying something about AI. So what we want to talk about today is good AI versus bad AI. So Shannon, you mentioned ChatGPT, right? So along those lines, I think all of us are aware that there's attackers out there that are using some of the ChatGPT and other AI features to launch attacks, and they're always changing their tactics. So along those lines, I think the first question that we kind of have teed up here is curious to get your viewpoint on how you're seeing cyber criminals using generative AI to launch some of those advanced attacks. Doesn't necessarily have to be what you're seeing in your company. If you don't want to share that for privacy reasons, totally get it. But just curious to get your thoughts and what you're seeing out there.
Certainly. I think the one thing we all probably have seen is the increase in emails that are coming through that are a little more sophisticated than they used to be. When I actually did a little bit of research into this, ChatGPT, which is great for all of us, has opened the door for lots of possibilities. And unfortunately, there are models out there that they call dark AI. They've been available on the web, the dark web, for a while. And most of them work based on subscription services, so you can $200 up to, I think, $1,700, $1,800 a year can access these dark AI solutions. And unlike your ChatGPTs, which are modeled with safety guardrails in place, these dark AI solutions don't have that. So what that means is the sky's the limit in terms of what these bad actors are able to do. And when you think about, SecOps, which is really the core for me, it's about speed, visibility, control. What does that happen when I've got bad actors out there that now have access to all of the great features that come with a solution like a ChatGPT, only there's no guardrails, there's no limits. They can craft, more convincing emails, they can do more reconnaissance, they can leverage that AI to develop exploits, and that timetable from when the patch is released. We used to have, longer time, but now with a solution like, an AI, they're just able to do that a lot quicker. So the level of sophistication, the speed to helping them accomplish their goals, I think that's, really what we're going to see in this next era.
So what I have seen, and just talking to peers as well as what we were experiencing, is a lot of it's around the deep fakes. We are seeing our CEO being impersonated, and when we're on the news, we're seeing more and more increase in that. And from an email perspective, we're very lucky to have technology that kind of helps us solve some of the phishing campaigns that come through around those lines. But for the deep fakes, because we don't have the controls for personal phones, our employees still like to use WhatsApp, and that's against our policy, but they still tend to think that the CEO is sending them messages through that mechanism, and then the fake CEOs asking them to look at a link and click on it, I need to talk to you, and some of them, and what we're seeing is that this is happening really on our outer country areas, right, the regions, not so much US, and I think a lot of it is because we touch our employees a lot in person and able to travel more here in the US and do virtual calls than we do regionally. But I think we're definitely going to see a lot more of the impersonations as these tools get a little more sophisticated. It's going to really get us in the technologies that we put in place is going to kind of help us get there. And as we start developing and putting more of these Gen AI tools in place where we're allowing our employees to kind of take advantage of some of the productivity and the things that they actually do good for, we are going to have to start getting ahead of the game in this space. So I think I'll pass it to Anessa.
No, those are both great. Certainly seeing the emails, certainly seeing the social profiles. I think the biggest thing is, in addition to those, will be the misinformation. We're at the peak just before the major election cycle here in the U.S., but there are major elections going on all over the world. And so being able to understand what's real versus what's false. For those as security practitioners, we can read into what we're seeing on the internet, what we're seeing in the news, but your parents cannot. Your children cannot. We are learning, our children are learning from the AI. Do you think my 11th grader is doing his math homework anymore? No. Not with the AI Not that just came out last week. It's even better at math than it was the previous version of ChatGPT. And so the more and more we're relying on algorithms, the more and more we're going to have to think that the cyber criminals know that. And so I think the other piece beyond the misinformation, disinformation, the replication of social profiles that look like your CEO and aren't, and the emails that are coming through, I think the other piece of this that we need to really start thinking through is, are they employed by you, or are insiders employed by you, or are insiders employed by those makers of those LLMs or those open models, and they're implanting things that will eventually come to be through mislogic or misinformation in the models. And so are you truly putting in place your governance programs to make sure that the hooks are in place from a risk perspective?
No, those are all great insights. I guess if we kind of dig in a little deeper, Erica, you mentioned deep fakes, but like specifically what kinds of attacks do you guys think we're going to start seeing from attackers? I know we're seeing QR code phishing quite a bit. That was pretty popular last year. There's just typical kinds of attacks that we've always seen, but do you have thoughts on where we think the attackers are going to go to try to launch, some new tactics specifically to make some disruption?
So I'll talk about deepfake for just a minute, because I do think we're seeing an increase in ability. So as I mentioned, with the dark AI, it lowers the barrier of entry, for a lot of bad actors. They don't need necessarily, advanced skills to be able to accomplish things like deepfake. And I think we're going to see a rise in blackmail and extortion, probably ransomware, not just from a deepfake, but just in general. And then the thing that I would say keeps me up at night would be polymorphic malware. So once you have the ability, whether you're a programmer or developer, have those skills, you have the ability to ask and prompt an AI to develop that sort of malware, that's where I say the sky is the limit in terms of what the desire will be and what the capabilities could be.
I feel like we're going to see an increase in the misconfigurations that all companies are going to be deploying AI with, right? So as we start allowing employees to use these tools to be efficient, there may be a lot of holes open up that if you don't have the proper governance or DLP solutions to be able to manipulate and monitor that activity that's happening, the threat actors are going to get into the data, so a lot of data leakage, exfiltration, and so forth. That's what I feel.
Yeah, I think we've opened the arena here as we've moved towards digital, right? We're hearing digital transformation. We're hearing move faster. We've opened the door for the future of our operational technology, our industrial control systems to be at risk. So the whole concept of, I'm sorry for the CrowdStrike reps in the room, but the whole concept of a misconfiguration that could cause us to, as a society, ground ourselves to a halt are really becoming more real than they ever have. I think what we talked about 15 years ago of, no, there's no way you could get to the control system of an airplane, you can't get to the control system of a vessel that's shipping cargo, you can't get to the control system of a power plant or of a an industrial energy facility. I think that's a misnomer at this point anymore, especially as we move more and more of these controls to the cloud, and more we move these controls to hands of folks that maybe didn't grow up in an era where things were manual in nature, and they don't really know how the systems operate. And so as security practitioners, we need to get ready. We need some new tech and some new process.
Which is our next topic.
Perfect lead into the next question, which is, what are your thoughts on, I think so many cybersecurity vendors out there claim to be able to do AI, and it's just such a hot topic. But from your perspective, what are your thoughts on tools that you can use or that we can use, to help mitigate some of that risk?
Well, when I think about this, the problem obviously is a big data problem. And when you think about AI, what's the best way to combat bad AI? It's leveraging good AI. You fight fire with fire. So I definitely think that that's the right path. I think as we look for, on the good side, how do we combat those things like polymorphic malware, detecting, really good, authentic-looking deep fakes? We've got to have the equivalent in terms of AI. The human eye, the human element is not going to be able to combat that. We've got to have the equivalent capability to be able to combat the bad.
And I would say, being that a lot of us have some good tools and maybe have some old tools, is leveraging the tools you have now, as some of these cloud providers have the new features already, and you have to want to use them, right, and test them into your environment. So we're fortunate to be able to have the technology to be able to do some of that. And but we also connect with our vendors. We have quarterly reviews with them with our environment, and we also ask them about their roadmaps and get more detailed insight to kind of help us think about strategically how we're going to move in the next generation for this. So that's what I think, some of the tools that we could definitely use. And then just kind of monitoring, keeping track of those things that we do have internally that are old, to pretty much get with the program now and move into something new for those old technologies that don't have that framework to morph with the trends.
And I'm going to say something somewhat provocative here, so we'll see if I get a reaction from someone in the crowd. So we've been talking a lot about software bill of materials over the last, I would say, 24 months. I think at some point we're going to get to a logic bill of materials. I think at some point we need to understand what's in these algorithms, how they work, and we have to inventory them just like we do source code. And if you can get into that methodology and that level of rigor, now you can attest to your customers that my AI is good. And I would say that we need technologies similar to how we invented vulnerability scanners, which is obviously a very difficult program to build out for anybody who's built it out. You're kind of chasing the string across the line there. We need something that will help us identify what bad looks like. Because human beings aren't going to be able to understand what bad logic looks like. And so somehow, some way, there's a lot of brain power in this room and in these rooms across the entire facility. These are the types of things I think we need to be brainstorming around, because we're almost too late to the game, guys. AI is not just getting here. AI has been built and has been part of our society for a better part of 20 years when you think of ML and AI. Generative AI is certainly becoming new, but it's certainly not brand new. For a lot of folks in Silicon Valley, they're like, been working on it for 10 years, right? Finally, you guys woke up that we're here. So I do believe that we have some work to do in that arena, and I think bad guys are beating us on this one because they're using all the good stuff for bad reasons. So.
I think at this point we've covered all of the main questions. Curious to open it up for some Q&A. If you got a microphone here in the middle, if you've got a question for the panel, would love to hear from you. Anyone?
Testing toolkit, or
Yeah. Look, I mean, when we think about our data scientists and what they're creating from a model standpoint, or what they're buying even from the vendors, the expectation is they're working collaboratively with developers to develop these things. These things they're just poof, coming out of thin air. So the concept there is similar to how we do app code scanning, dynamic or static scanning, or vulnerability scanning. Shouldn't we be doing some sort of logic scanning? And inventorying. I think that's really where I was going on that. Does that answer your question? Okay. Great question. You guys, there's a lot of people in this room. Come on.
I'll ask while everybody's thinking. Someone mentioned we see data in ChatGPT, whether we're kids or parents. What with the end user at work? How are we changing our process of how we are teaching our end users? Has your mindset changed how the awareness training is?
I'll take that. So I think that we are going to be training the next generation through the lens of linguistics. Because when you go into a prompt, when you're asking the GPT for a question, I may ask it from the perspective of a white female from Louisiana that's lived in Texas for 20 years and traveled to 36 countries. That doesn't mean that I'm going to be prompting, if I ask, do I need a new iPhone? That doesn't mean the person that lives in another country is going to ask the same question the same way. And in my mind, from a linguistic standpoint, you got the power right now, because those folks, they're trained on how to ask the question in a way that they'll yield the right response. And so to me, that's the next evolution of all of this. And if your model can take in consideration all those pieces and parts of the cultures in which we all come from, I think the answers become better and better as you go over time. But our kids are not going to be able to identify that kind of stuff. So they need to understand how these models are built and what they're built upon.
Hi. What roadblocks are y'all seeing in adopting AI in your organizations, and how do you overcome them?
That's a great question. I know within Intergy, we've actually got an organization that's dedicated to AI, and it has its own vice president with a governance structure. Initially, when AI came out, we had concerns from a security standpoint about privacy. How is it going to be used? How are we going to control it? And right out of the gate, we just said, okay, block. There's no category yet, so let's just put in some blocks for the ones we know about, so that way we can get our arms around it. But there was extreme interest from the top of the organization. There's complete awareness that this is a game changer and has so much potential, not only to generate ideas, but the innovation side of, if you're in a company that wants to look for what is that next disruptor, those prompts can help you generate ideas for what that could be. So we see it as this great potential element to innovation in the company. What that has also meant is, how do we make sure that we are all collectively marching toward the same goal? And you've got to have ways of maneuvering the organization. So we've got a very strong governance program. There's a governance committee. We meet once a week and talk about what's allowed, what's not allowed. There's lots of interest. That team, I think, already has over 1,000 slated projects from across the organization. We're a Fortune 500 company, but we're not, the largest company. But with that sort of demand, we're trying to, from the security perspective, we're trying to enable that, because that's certainly in alignment with Path to Premier and everything that the organization is looking to do. But we've got to make sure we still have the right boundaries and guidelines, so that we don't end up with privacy issues and other security concerns.
I'll just add to that. We're not as sophisticated at Intergy yet, but there has not been any roadblocks for us. I mean, I think business units still want to use it. They embraced it very early on in 2023, and we started with the Copilot and then the developing Copilot for Microsoft, and it kind of slowed down a little bit. We put some governance, some policies around it, training our employees to, get in the forefront of understanding it a little bit better, but it has slowed down for us, and I foresee that it's going to start picking back up as our business changes.
Yeah, this is a good topic. So AI is just the next generation of disruptive technology, right? And we've gone through these many times. And to your point, we lag behind. Legislation lags, our response lags. And technology always kind of overwhelms us before we actually get legislation and practice in place. Question is there legislation that you're aware of that might be looking at this in terms of code moving forward, following some type of standard of, like in the open marketplace for products, you've got a UL certification. In cloud, you've got FedRAMP, TextRAMP. This is another platform that's a big concern to not just people in this room, but this is societal. So a question about how code moving forward will have to follow some type of certification. Not UL, but some type of certification that we can rely on as part of our inventory.
That's a fantastic insight, actually. What I'll say is I haven't seen regulation. I have seen Jen Easterly from CISA be very vocal about it, though. In fact, calling out our software companies and our companies, just to be frank, just globally saying it's no longer secure by design. It's you must secure, right? Secure first. And so I've seen her kind of translate that a bit differently. Will we collectively across the globe be able to enforce some things? I don't know, right? We still don't have cyber laws yet. I'm still disappointed we haven't found some red lines to put in place yet. But I think that's definitely an insightful piece. I think we should be looking towards something that gives us some assurances, no different than when and when not to plug something in the wall, right? So I think that's for us to ponder.
So the latest in the news for the airlines, if they don't have enough problems, is the GPS spoofing, right, that these pilots are seeing. Yes. So that brings up the AI inference at the edge. I'd like to know your thoughts on how do we balance that? Because to make those decisions in real time, you have to have a trade-off of security versus productivity.
Okay, I'll take that one unless you guys want to do edge or? Okay, all right. I don't ever think you have to make a trade-off. I think it can be a partnership. Edge does not have to be insecure. We have APNs that we can put in place from a cellular perspective. We can wrap things in VPNs on satellite. There's ways in which to make the edge secure, and we can make those decisions. We've been doing it in oil and gas for 20 years. I think we need to all share how we do that. And I think many of our boutique IoT vendors want to get out there, take a Raspberry Pi, throw it on the site and go, put it on an internet connection. And then it lights up Shodan like a Christmas tree. And Sis is calling all of us going, what did you do? Right? Well, that's our engineers. They're tinkering, right? That's what they're do. I'm married to one, so I can talk about them like that, right? But I think that we need to help the supply population talk about how we can get their IoT to be in a better place. So I'll share that. You probably have IoT too. Edge?
Just ditto.
Agree.
Fair. All right, well, you guys get the next ones.
All right, so there is an increase in misinformation out in the world, in the news, as well as a lack of representation for women and minorities. With that being said, AI pulls the data and the models that are exposed for common knowledge. How do you think we can address the risk of the misinformation so it doesn't feed back into the models, as well as using to our advantage the lack of representation for minorities and everybody else that is not represented?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I don't know that we have a full solution at this point, but I know that there is quite a focus on that, whether or not there's inherent bias because of the information that's being fed in, and that information does represent bias. And I think because it's something that's being studied, that we're going to figure out ways that we can make sure that responses out of those prompts are fair and take into consideration, long-term impacts. I don't know if you guys want to add to that.
That's a great question. Don't have one for that one.
I don't know that I necessarily have an answer, but I do think it's a challenge, right? I think that the internet is what these models initially learned from. So I think us being cautious as corporations, as we're bringing models in, whether you're bringing in private models or public models, making sure that you understand where the training has come from. Go ahead.
And to touch a little bit of what she had mentioned, sorry, I made a bit of a stir yesterday in another talk that I have never used ChatGPT at all, or any other AI generative except for Midjourney, which does art. My reason for that is that the first time I've ever heard of it was somebody telling me to use it to write a paper for me. I am still a student. So that put a very bad taste in my mouth. And everybody's saying that it's like the end all be all, it's this new greatest thing, really just turned me off from it. And then, like mentioned before, the misinformation. What is something that we can do, especially as a new person that I have never used an AI like this, to make sure that what I'm doing is legitimate and I'm not gonna give myself misinformation? Because if I wanted to know something, then I can just Google it with a credible source aside from using ChatGPT. So what would the advantage of that be?
What would the advantage of using
That over just Googling the information myself using trusted sources that I know for sure are legitimate?
I mean, I'm like you. I've used it I dabbled into it, and I'm a very ethical person, so I write my own papers in college, and but I'm sure my son sitting next to you over there does not, right? Even from writing resumes and things like that. But I think the education is key to making sure that you are, taking all that into consideration. And as we talked earlier about young people knowing that what they're reading on the internet, even before all this came about, it's not always true. Trust your sources before you go to it. Just like we tell people, make sure you go to legitimate websites. It's just, you have to have that mindset to be able to kind of think forward and forward thinking in that. But
I think the other thing is it's just like anything. So even if you go to the internet, you may hit a site that sounds very authoritarian on a topic, but it's misleading and it's not true. And so you cross-reference and you do enough research that you end up coming to the truth. I think, as we look to, government and whoever that will hopefully help in this fight against deep fakes and misinformation, that will get better, and these solutions are going to have higher fidelity information in them. But today we aren't there yet, so I'd say continue to use it as a tool, but cross-check and leverage those other, sites and things for information.
I'll just add one thing, since you're saying you're new to ChatGPT, and the difference between ChatGPT and Google, or the experience, is you're going to be able to query in natural language out of ChatGPT. So if you're saying, where's the best lunch spot around George R. Brown? You could ask Google that, and it's going to give you a list of different options. What the experience you may get out of ChatGPT may be just more robust, because you're able to get not only the list of options, you may get, it may fill in with other things from, to your point, misinformation or good information, bad information or good information, but you may get additional sources. Checking those sources is very important, but I think it's making that search easier would be the answer.
And one more thing, it's slightly related to this, and you may not do it, but others are certainly out there, leveraging ChatGPT and other solutions to develop their resumes and to even help them in the interview process. So for all the professionals out there, if you haven't come across this circumstance, we now have in-person interviews, because we've caught a couple of people that have tried to leverage AI, the generative AI, in order to land a job. And so it is being used in that way. And, So what it's forced us to do is basically, step up our interrogation and understanding of people and their expertise.
Mine kind of piggybacks off this when it comes to, you mentioned like your 11th grader doing math and using it. Do we see any long-term implementations of ChatGPT when it comes to the next generation of being able to fix things? For example, if there is a stop and we don't have access to do it anymore, what happens then if they don't have the tools that they learn?
We're looking for your generation to tell us that. No. In all seriousness, I think it's just like these. I didn't grow up with a cell phone.
I didn't either, for the record.
Right? I mean, I think more than anything, it's just going to change the way we work. I think Industrial 4.0 is here, and I think ChatGPT is the start of it, and generative AI is the start of it. I encourage all of you, their generative models that are out there right now are just mind-blowing. I watched one last Friday, two Fridays ago, and some of the folks in the room were with me. We watched a young lady who said she's been working on this 2-year model that effectively could take troves of medical information. So think about how you get your medical diagnosis. And the biggest thing that models have trouble doing is reading across pages, especially when it's in newspaper style, where it kind of goes from one page to the next and across different columns. She literally had perfected the way in which the model can read all of that and take and cite by line item and portion of the document multiple hundreds of thousands of pages in documents and succinctly give a doctor the diagnosis and the pharmaceuticals necessary. That is unreal compared to what we have today. So a doctor's whole job is going to be much different. A nurse's whole job is going to be much different. Think of that applied to all of our industries. Our kids are going to be learning. They're not going to have the same jobs we have. Let's be honest. They won't. They'll be different. So my kid wants to be a lawyer. I'm like, no.
Just to add a little bit more to that, I've got 5 children, and so I'm certainly interested in how this is shaping their minds. My oldest is 15, the youngest is 7. And when I think about technology and what it's done for them, they are learning at such a rapid pace compared to what we had. It was TV, cartoons on Saturday. The sky's the limit for them because they're able to tap into information, get answers immediately. They've got on-demand services for pretty much anything that they're interested in. And the things that when I think about myself as a 8-year-old, what did I know as an 8-year-old? They probably know 4, 5, 6 times as much, maybe even more than that. So I think nobody can really, there's no crystal ball to say what does this mean for them, but I definitely see a lot of potential positives out of that.
Just for the bigger audience, she just asked us, so because of the transactional nature of how these kids are learning, does that stay in their short-term memory, or does that actually log all the way to their long-term memory? Man, I don't know how to answer that, but I can say that if you're sitting here doing this on TikTok all day or whatever, oh my gosh, I'm just, the brain's getting warped, right? It's almost like psychological warfare in some ways, so it's good. It's good insight. This goes for adults too, by the way.
From the perspective of compliance side in regards to the ChatGPT, how are your companies implementing that for your employees? We've talked about educating the employees. We've talked about putting in boundaries and guidelines. From that perspective, are we making policies for these? Do you have policies that the employees are able to utilize? Are we making it mandatory in regards to what they can and cannot do, how it can be utilized as it transitioned to audits from this perspective, and going in when something that's new or being implemented into the companies, eventually we get to the part of this will be audited against the policies and procedures that the companies are having now?
Not as sophisticated as that, but we are a smaller company, but we work very close with our legal department, and so whenever there's new information or new things that they're hearing, they pull us aside, we talk to them, we add language to our policies. It's not a AI policy in itself, it's just portions of it that have AI, and then we continue to train and make sure that people are aware. But as far as like risk assessments, we do those manually. There's no AI doing that for us. That needs and requires people. So when there's technology that our business units are looking at that have these features and functions in them, we ask a lot of questions and we try to leverage our skill set and experience to be able to make sure that we're aligning with what the business is trying to do, but also offering that balance. So that's what we do at our company.
At Entergy, we've actually developed two different generative solutions. One is internally branded Alex, and the other is branded Eva. And they have different sources of data in order to, have different responses out of those. And I think they were designed for different solutions internally. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we actually put the guardrails up pretty early and wanted to sort of guide the company down the approved path. And so we've developed these solutions. There's this list of over 1,000 other use cases internally that the teams are looking to continue building. Whether or not we end up with another one, I know security, we've got a lot of interest in ideas on that list. And so I think as long as you're thinking about it from, we do have policy to guide employees and help them understand the risk, and then these approved solutions that are looking to expand.
I'll just add a tactical, just something you could take away. So we have the NIST AI risk management framework if you're really creating models from the ground up. So that's one source. The other, I would say, there's a think tank called Equal AI, and they have a mock policy out there. If you want to start from instead of starting from a blank sheet of paper, you can actually go out and look. It's a consortium of many different companies, including Silicon Valley folks that have put in the brain trust to at least start a policy. In our realm, we call that a standard because we have an overall policy and a book of standards, and so we are embarking upon that. And I would say the only other add beyond the governance committee that we've, and also the kind of intake funnel, I'll call it, is that we have dedicated an architect and dedicated a governance risk compliance person to get in front of in front of the solution, so that when the solutions are coming in, we're embedded in the process early. And so that's really another area that you can start to think about. Now, it's not to say that all my other team members aren't going to get involved. They get pulled in as they need to.
Thank you.
Hopefully that helps. All right. I think we have time for one more question.
Hi. As publicly owned and traded companies, what are some of your concerns about AI and compliance that might come in the future?
More regulation in 3 minutes or less. The fear is we need to regulate again, and goodness gracious, we have enough regulations across our industries. I don't think we need more. I think the other fear is that, without the proper security protections, we're going to see the propagation of these security incidents, whether it be breaches or whether it be just, misconfigurations. And so I think more than anything, it's us trying to keep us from hurting ourselves.
I agree.
I think the initial regulation may actually be more in the, what happens to these bad actors that are trying to use the deep fakes and, as a measure to extort, they're taking advantage of, the morality issues, going to a porn site and things like that and turning it into a deep fake. So I think it's initially going to be targeting that kind of behavior. Down the corporate line, it's probably, compliance and the risk of additional regulation.
Does that help? Cool. Thank you. Thanks for all the great questions. That was awesome. We have 1 minute left, so as we kind of wrap up here, one last fun thing. If you could go back and take one class, what would it be?
So this was the one I hoped you didn't ask. I think for me, at where I am in my life, it would be some kind of spiritual course. And I'm not even sure, philosophy, if it would be, in the religions, but more just the spirituality. I think I'd be interested in something on that topic.
This was not hard for me. My sequel, it took me 3 failed attempts and 3 months to take that class.
Okay, so you guys have to remember, I'm a kinesiology undergrad, so I did not take any hard classes in college. So I want to go back and take quantum. Like, what in the world? I want to go do something hard that I need to go learn about that all of us are going to be challenged with in the next 10 years. So that's mine.
Thanks everybody for coming. We appreciate you, and thanks for the panelists.